All right. Today, we are going to finish part 1 of the novel. So we'll pick up where we left off at the top of page 31 and go to page 33. And that will be the end of part 1. And you will know it's the end of part 1 because you will see the beginning of part 2. And you will stop there. So today's TV statistics. It's got some general ones. The typical percentage of local TV news broadcast time devoted to advertising, about 30%. The percentage devoted to stories about crime, disaster, and war, 53.8%. Percentage devoted to public service announcements, 0.7. Percentage of Americans who can name the Three Stooges, 59%. Percentage who can name at least 3 justices of the U.S. Supreme Court, 17. So I'll be honest, I did not used to know at least 3 justices of the U.S. Supreme Court. I've paid attention to them a lot more in the last few years, maybe partially because of the statistic, because it made me feel sad that I didn't know who they were. But I can definitely name at least 3 of them now. Hopefully you can name at least a couple, at least the controversial ones, you know. All right, anyways. Before we get to reading for today, I do have a little clip for you here. One thing that Beatty mentioned in his little diatribe from the other day is that in a world that's focused on entertainment, you only keep the things that are really just like pure, mindless, vapid entertainment. And part of that, he said, was comedy. So I would like to present to you this comedy skit because I think it is an example of comedy that is not vapid and mindless. In fact, I think a lot of comedy, has a point and a purpose to it. And this particular clip is from the 1950s. So I find it interesting that, maybe, who knows, but maybe Ray Bradbury might have seen it and perhaps seen it as an exception to his mindless entertainment rule that he kind of thought of about television. So Abbott and Costello are a very famous comic pairing, and Who's On First is one of their most famous comedy routines, possibly one of the most famous comedy routines of all time. So check it out. Enjoy. I won't play it on here because echoes and feedbacks, but it's very clever, very well done. And later on in the year, we'll actually have a little mini unit on comedians and comics and satire as a form of social critique and social progress. And I will harken back to Abbott and Costello at that time. So I bring them to you now because they are from the 1950s and thus relevant to our book time-wise, and we'll come back to them more at a later date as well. Okay, so back to Montag. Beatty has just left. Montag has been given a temporary reprieve on going to work. Let's see how his conversation with his wife goes, because they definitely have something to talk about. So starting at the little page break here, Montag turned and looked at his wife, who sat in the middle of the parlor talking to an announcer, who in turn was talking to her. "Mrs. Montag," he was saying, this, that, and the other. "Mrs. Montag," something else and still another. The converter attachment, which had cost them $100, automatically supplied her name whenever the announcer addressed his anonymous audience, leaving a blank where the proper syllables could be filled in. A special spot Wavex scrambler also caused his televised image, in the area immediately about his lips, to mouth the vowels and consonants beautifully. He was a friend, no doubt of it, a good friend. "Mrs. Montag, now look right here." Her head turned, though she quite obviously was not listening. Montag said, "It's only a step from not going to work today to not working tomorrow to not working at the firehouse ever again." "You are going to work tonight, though, aren't you?" said Mildred. "I haven't decided. Right now I've got an awful feeling. I want to smash things and kill things." "Go take the Beetle." "No, thanks." "Your keys to the Beetle are on the night table. I always like to drive fast when I feel that way. You get it up around 95 and you feel wonderful. Sometimes I drive all night and come back and you don't know it. It's fun out in the country. You hit rabbits, sometimes you hit dogs. Go take the Beetle." "No, I don't want to, this time. I want to hold on to this funny thing. God, it's gotten big on me. I don't know what it is. I'm so damned unhappy. I'm so mad, and I don't know why I feel like that. Putting on weight. I feel fat. I feel like I've been saving up a lot of things and don't know what. I might even start reading books. They'd put you in jail, wouldn't they? She looked at him as if he were behind the glass wall. He began to put on his clothes, moving restlessly about the bedroom. Yes, and it might be a good idea, before I hurt someone. Did you hear, Beatty? Did you listen to him? He knows all the answers. He's right. Happiness is important. Fun is everything. And yet I kept sitting there saying to myself, I'm not happy. I'm not happy. I am, Mildred's mouth beamed, and proud of it. I'm going to do something, said Montag. I don't even know what yet, but I'm going to do something big. I'm tired of listening to this junk, said Mildred, turning from him to the announcer again. Montag touched the volume control in the wall, and the announcer was speechless. Millie, he paused, this is your house as well as mine. I feel it's only fair that I tell you something now. I should have told you before, but I wasn't even admitting it to myself. I have something I want you to see, something I've put away and hid during the past year, now and again, once in a while. I didn't know why, but I did it, and I never told you. He took hold of a straight-backed chair and moved it slowly and steadily into the hall near the front door and climbed up on it and stood for a moment like a statue on a pedestal, his wife standing under him, waiting. Then he reached up and pulled back the grill of the air conditioning system and reached far back inside to the right and moved still another sliding sheet of metal and took out a book. Without looking at it, he dropped it to the floor. He put his hand back up and took out 2 books and moved his hand down and dropped the 2 books to the floor. He kept moving his hand and dropping books, small ones, fairly large ones, yellow, red, green ones. When he was done, he looked down upon some 20 books lying at his wife's feet. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't really think, but now it looks as if we're in this together. Mildred backed away, as if she were suddenly confronted by a pack of mice that had come up out of the floor. He could hear her breathing rapidly, and her face was paled out, and her eyes were fastened wide. She said his name over, twice, 3 times. Then, moaning, she ran forward, seized a book, and ran toward the kitchen incinerator. He caught her, shrieking. He held her, and she tried to fight away from him, scratching. No, Millie, no, wait, stop it, will you? You don't know. Stop it. He slapped her face. He grabbed her again and shook her. She said his name and began to cry. Millie, he said, listen, give me a second, will you? We can't do anything. We can't burn these. I want to look at them, at least look at them once. Then, if what the captain says is true, we'll burn them together. Believe me, we'll burn them together. You must help me. He looked down into her face and took hold of her chin and held her firmly. He was looking not only at her, but for himself and what he must do in her face. Whether we like this or not, we're in it. I've never asked for much from you in all these years, but I ask it now. I plead for it. We've got to start somewhere here, figuring out why we're in such a mess. You and the medicine at night and the car and me and my work. We're heading right for the cliff, Millie. God, I don't want to go over. This isn't going to be easy. We haven't anything to go on, but maybe we can piece it out and figure it and help each other. I need you so much right now, I can't tell you. If you love me at all, you'll put up with this. 24, 48 hours, that's all I ask. Then it'll be over. I promise, I swear. And if there is something here, just one little thing out of a whole mess of things, maybe we can pass it on to someone else. She wasn't fighting anymore, so he let her go. She sagged away from him and slid down the wall and sat on the floor looking at the books. Her foot touched one, and she saw this and pulled her foot away. That woman, the other night, Millie, you weren't there. You didn't see her face. And Clarice, you never talked to her. I talked to her. And men like Beatty are afraid of her. I can't understand it. Why should they be so afraid of someone like her? But I kept putting her alongside the firemen in the house last night, and I suddenly realized I didn't like them at all. And I didn't like myself at all anymore. And I thought maybe it would be best if the firemen themselves were burnt. Guy! The front door voice called softly. Mrs. Montag, someone here, someone here. Mrs. Montag, someone here. Softly. They turned to stare at the door, and the books toppled everywhere in heaps. Beatty, said Mildred. It can't be him. He's come back, she whispered. The front door voice called again softly. Someone here. We won't answer. Montag lay back against the wall and then slowly sank to a crouching position and began to nudge the books bewilderedly with his thumb, his forefinger. He was shivering, and he wanted above all to shove the books back up through the ventilator again, but he knew he could not face Beatty again. He crouched, and then he sat, and the voice of the front door spoke again, more insistently. Montag picked a single small volume from the floor. Where do we begin? He opened the book halfway and peered at it. We begin by beginning, I guess. Come in, said Mildred, and burn us and the books. The front door voice faded at last. There was a silence. Montag felt the presence of someone beyond the door, waiting, listening. Then the footsteps going away down the walk and over the lawn. Let's see what this is, said Montag. He spoke the words haltingly and with a terrible self-consciousness. He read a dozen pages here and there and came at last to this. It is computed that 11,000 persons have at several times suffered death rather than submit to break eggs at the smaller end. Mildred sat across the hall from him. What does it mean? It doesn't mean anything. The captain was right. Here now, said Montag. We'll start over again at the beginning. All right, so I'm sure you probably saw it coming, but we have finally confirmed that Montag has a little treasure trove of books that have been hidden up in the ventilator grill all this time. So you may have started to have some doubts when he took that one and put it behind his pillow, because, surely if he's been doing this for a while, he'd put it with the other ones, right? But he was so upset about that woman that he neglected to put that one book with the rest of them, with his little treasure trove up there, his 20 books that he has collected behind the ventilator grill. But now he feels like he has to deal with them. He can't just keep them hidden away, back in the ventilator grill. He's got to do something because Beatty's wrong, and he doesn't understand why Beatty's wrong. He just knows that it's not right, and he's not happy, and he's got to do something about it. Mildred, on the other hand, is reasonably confident that she is happy. Of course, there was the whole taking all the pills in her bottle thing, but, maybe by now we've realized that perhaps she is just stupid enough to do that and not realize she's done it. She definitely doesn't seem to have a lot of empathy for others. We saw that in the scene with Montag, and then she's boasting about hitting rabbits and dogs with her car. She's kind of an awful person. It's probably a pretty close race, a close competition between Mildred and Beatty. They both kind of suck, but for really different reasons. So I think probably each person feels a little bit more disgusted by one of them than the other. Me personally, Mildred makes me cringe, but Beatty isn't great either. It's tough. Okay, so anyways, Montag has begged Mildred. He has appealed to her, please, please help me. If you love me, you'll help me. Don't know if that's his strongest appeal right now. You probably want to give her something that works in her self-interest, but okay, Montag, you can believe that Mildred still loves you. We'll see. So anyways, we'll see if Mildred is loyal to Montag or if she double crosses him. There was something else I was going to point out. Can't see what it is. Yes, this bit at the end here. One thing to consider when imagining Montag, trying to read all these books, is the society that Montag has grown up in. He has not spent any of his educational life learning how to read and interpret complex literature. By the time you get to, 11th grade, this is probably something you take for granted. The ability to read, difficult and challenging material and kind of work through what's being said. You didn't get to this point overnight, though. You spent years, over a decade at this point, reading progressively more challenging and difficult literature. Montag is not educated in this way. I mean, obviously he's literate, he is able to read, but the critical thinking skills required to interpret this material and to understand it, he's just not there. So this sentence, for example, out of context, it obviously sounds like total gibberish, but it's actually from a book called Gulliver's Travels. And in Gulliver's Travels, it is also a satire. In Gulliver's Travels, you have this man, Gulliver, And he travels around visiting all of these strange lands. The one that is the most famous that you might have heard of is his visit to the Lilliputians, I think is how you pronounce it. Very little tiny people who tie him up with ropes and things. And yeah, so that may be an image that you're familiar with. I think they came out with a Gulliver's Travels that had Jack Black in it a while ago. Didn't see it though. But anyways, this sentence is from Gulliver's Travels. And in Gulliver's Travels, he travels to a land where there has been a violent and terrible civil war raging in this country. And the issue that this civil war has been about is which end of an egg should it be broken at when trying to open the egg. I presume these eggs are hard-boiled or something, but point being that obviously the satire in this case is making fun of the idea that sometimes we have absolutely horrible, ridiculous wars about completely trivial, nonsensical issues. But Montag has no way of knowing this. Even reading the entire book, it's unlikely that he'll be able to figure out the issues that this book is trying to critique. It's very advanced satire. It's very difficult. So, what's Montag going to do? His wife sure isn't going to be any help. She definitely does not have any more intellectual capacity than he does. Where will he get help? Or will he just give up? That is the question we will have to wrestle with in part 2 of the novel. So, that concludes part 1. Obviously, at this point, you can answer all of the part 1 questions. Just make sure on those last 2 questions that you are using textual evidence from the text. We have this lovely digital copy. I'm sure you can find some things that you can copy and paste into your response and obviously, incorporate smoothly into your answers. And yeah, so I will take any questions that you have about the part 1 questions. And yeah, that's all we have for part 1.